Of The Pit and Pendulum by Edgar Allan Poe. The whole story would have taken too long to read, so um, this is just a small part of The Pit and Pendulum by Edgar Allan Poe. At first, the ravenous animals were startled and terrified at the change, at the cessation of movement. They shrank alarmedly back, many sought the well. But this was only for a moment. I had not counted in vain upon their ferocity. Observing that I remained without motion, one or two of the boldest leaped upon the framework and smelled at the circling. This seemed the signal for a general rush. Forth from the well they hurried in fresh troops. They clung to the wood. They overran it, and leaped into hundreds upon my person. The measured movement of the pendulum disturbed them not at all. Avoiding its strokes, they busied themselves with the anointed bandage. They pressed, they swarmed upon me in ever-accumulating heaps. They writhed upon my throat, their cold lips sought my own. I was half stifled by their thronging pressure. Disgust, for which the world has no name, swelled my bosom and chilled with a heavy clamminess my heart. Yet 1 minute, and I felt that the struggle would be over. Plainly I perceived the loosening of the bandage. I knew that in more than one place it must be already severed. With a more than human resolution, I laid still. Nor had I erred in my calculations, nor had I endured in vain. I at length felt that I was free. The circling hung in ribbons from my hands, but the stroke of the pendulum already pressed upon my bosom. It had divided the serge of the robe. It had cut through the linen beneath. Twice again it swung, and a sharp sense of pain shot through every nerve. But the moment of escape had arrived. At a wave of my hand, the deliverers hurried tumultuously away. With a steady movement, cautious, sidelong, shrinking, and slow, I slid from the embrace of the bandage and beyond the reach of the scimitar. For the moment at last, I was free. Free, and in the grasp of the Inquisition. I had scarcely stepped away from my wooden bed of horror upon the stone floor of the prison when the motion of the hellish machine ceased, and I beheld it drawn up by some invisible force through the ceiling. This was a lesson which I took desperately to heart. My every motion was undoubtedly watched. Free, I had but escaped death in one form of agony, to be delivered unto worse than death in some other. With that thought I rolled my eyes nervously around the barriers of iron that hemmed within me. Something unusual, some change which at first I could not appreciate distinctly, it was obvious, had taken place in the apartment. For many minutes of a dreamy and trembling abstraction, I busied myself in vain, unconnected conjecture. During this period I became aware for the first time of the origin of the sulphurous light which illuminated the cell. It proceeded from a fissure about half an inch in width, extending entirely around the prison at the base of the walls, which thus appeared, and were completely separated from the floor. I endeavored, but of course in vain, to look through the aperture. As I rose from my attempt, the mystery of the alteration in the chamber broke at once upon my understanding. I have observed that although the outlines of the figures upon the walls were sufficiently distinct, yet the colors seemed blurred and indefinite. These colors had now assumed, and were momentarily assuming, a startling and more intense brilliancy that gave to the spectral and fiendish portraitures an aspect that might have thrilled even firmer nerves than my own. Demon eyes of a wild and ghastly vivacity glared upon me in 1,000 directions, where none had been visible before, and gleamed with the lurid lustre of a fire that I could not force my imagination to regard as unreal. Unreal, even while I breathed, there came to my nostrils the breath of vapor of heated iron. A suffocating odor pervaded the prison. A deeper glow settled each moment in the eyes that glared at my agonies. The richer tint of crimson diffused itself over the pictured horrors of blood. I panted. I gasped for breath. There could be no doubt of the design of my tormentors. Oh, most unrelenting! Oh, most demoniac of men! I shrank from the glowing metal of the center of the cell. Amid the thought of the fiery destruction that impended, the idea of the coolness of the wall overcame my soul like a balm. I rushed to its deadly brink. I threw my straining vision below. The glare from the enkindled roof illuminated its inmost recesses. Yet for a wild moment did my spirit refuse to comprehend the meaning of what I saw. At length it wrestled its way into my soul. It burned itself upon my shuddering reason. Oh, for a voice to speak! Oh, horror! Oh, any horror but this! With a shriek I rushed from the margin, and buried my face in my hands, weeping bitterly.